Welcome back, dear friends. In today's video, I will show my game against Indonesian player Azaria Setiaki Hodi. Yes, almost 2400 player. We both had 4 out of 4, and in fifth round of HC tournament, we faced each other, and I had black pieces. Let's go. And another Najdorf we see. Earlier, I think in round four, my opponent had queen d3 move. He played queen d3 against the Barat. Of course, I checked with the modern engines, and I also um, checked all my games, and I decided to surprise my opponent a little bit. So after queen d3, I already played knight bd7 against Pavel Pankratov, and I already played g6. So for this game, I decided to surprise by going e6. Earlier, uh, some very high-rated players, legends of our game, tried in this position a to a4, but I think the strongest and the most principal continuation is what Jordan Van Forest played against Benjamin Gledura in Isle of Man 2023. So here he went g to g4. Yeah, seems like a pawn is hanging, but white is ready to sacrifice the pawn, open up a g file, and get some compensation and activity. Yes, and my point was, of course, to take the pawn and try to see how deep, how further my opponent analyzed this position. So knight takes g4, rook g1. I can recommend that another option is being queen g3, and if knight goes back, maybe developing the bishop from c1. Yes, rook g1, one of the best moves, and actually the move Jordan has played against Gledura. Here, if I'm not mistaken, Benjamin played knight e5 back, or maybe first h5 and then after h3, knight e5 back. Yes, the strongest is knight f6, and here bishop g5, what engines are showing at h6. White goes bishop g5, provokes h6, and goes back with the bishop back to e3 or d2. So here I knew that before the game I had time to check briefly with the engines that if bishop e3 then bd7 is coming and let's say long castle there is knight c5 and after queen e2 you just take the pawn on e4. Despite it does look very dangerous, but you take and you ignore everything. Yes, bishop d2, b5, and I didn't know anything after b5. I just knew that the move is b5. And the ideas are to get my bishop on b7, knight on bd7, and depends how white reacts uh, to just play. So bishop g2, of course, my opponent is preparing e4, e5, and yes, I played knight bd7. Yes, my initial idea was here to, yes, to play b4. And if knight e2, then e5. And if white is moving the knight, then knight c6. But here, I realized that bishop b4 is working. And white is taking the pawn back. And let's say if you don't take on d4, then why you allowed white to take the pawn back? And of course, if you take e takes d, then e5 works. Let's say d takes e5, then bishop f8, and a8 is also hanging. So because of this, I did not play b4 and e5. So I played knight bd7 and f4, knight c5, queen e3. Yes, I should say that here, for example, if I go some bishop b7, I did not like Let me. No, I think bishop b7 maybe was bishop b7 of course because of e5. Let's say bishop g2, then e takes f comes, and bishop on g2 is hanging, pawn on g7 is hanging, and of course if d takes c, then bishop b7. So I played knight bd7 to stop all kind of e5 ideas. Well, black is simply taking on e5 with the knight. So f4, and here my initial idea was to go bishop b7, but then I realized that these kind of ideas can be possible. Let's say knight takes e6 and f takes c e5. Yes, position is quite complicated. Queen g6 checks are always there. b7 is hanging, f6 is hanging. Yes, because my idea after e5 um, was to try something like knight c5. This was my point. But of course, knight e6 and then e5 comes. Yes, knight c5, queen e3, b4. Yes, the strongest knight e2, bishop b7, e5. Yes, again, if bishop takes g2, then e takes f6 comes. Knight d5, bishop d5, bishop d5. All these, according to engines, are the strongest. And here my opponent went wrong by castling long side. E takes d would have been the strongest. And let's say if you take bishop d6, then knight f5 ideas are there. Yes, long castle. And here I should have gone for d takes c, f takes c, queen b6. But of course, I did not take on e5 because I was scared and afraid of allowing opponent to get a four square for the knight. So I was scared of knight f4, but engines are telling that after bishop e4, white does not have anything. So I played queen b6, e takes d, and long castle. Yes, white is having pair of bishops. Uh, Black is having pair of bishops. I apologize. And very soon black will take on d6. And yes, it is very hard for white to create any counterplay. Yes, here my opponent after the game wanted to make this move work, like bishop d5, bishop d5, and here he wanted to play bishop b4. And I think the line here goes, yes, the line here goes, let's say queen h4, you go knight g3, d takes c, and you go bishop c5, queen takes c5. Yes, if I'm not mistaken, this is the line. But now, for example, why not queen f6? No, queen f6 maybe. Yes, I think here the move was bishop takes c5, bishop c5, and queen takes c5. And according to engines, this was the best. Anyway, black is doing slightly better. But the way my opponent played, long castle, queen b6, e takes d, long castle, and here the only idea is being to go f5, but black is just taking bishop d6 and f takes c. 96 ideas are always there, and if you, of course, after f5, bishop d6, took on g7, black is having e6, e5 ideas. So a3, and here surprisingly, a5 is the only move to keep the winning advantage. I was also trying to make b takes a work, but queen a3 comes, and then white is having some bishop a5 ideas. So a5, it is very important to keep pawn on b4, which restricts uh, almost all white minor pieces. And of course, if you take a takes b, a takes b, you only open up a5 for black's pieces. f5, bishop takes d6, f takes c, and here Of course, I could take on e6 with the pawn, with the knight, but I realized that b takes a3 works because if queen a3, there is knight b3 check. And of course, you don't really want to take with the b pawn. So my opponent instantly played b3. I took on e6 with the knight. Here, maybe the only chance was to go queen c3, but I wanted to go queen c5. My opponent took knight e6, queen e3, bishop takes e3, and here I could take with the bishop, but I decided to go f takes c6, and of course black is having few pawns up, bishop f4 and e5. Rook d5, he takes f4, rook takes a5, f3. And here f2 and rook e8. And here my opponent resigned because, for example, if you go rook f2, then rook e1 finishes the game. King d2, there is bishop b4, or knight d1, I can simply take on d1. And after rook a8, black is having bishop b8. Yes, my opponent resigned. I won fifth game in a row. And yes, it was very important game also from theoretical point of view. Hope you liked the video, and I will continue recording more material for you. Thank you.